brother of Cheryl and son of Myra and Ben Greenblatt, long time members of Torah 4. Day of Learning. Today is the 22nd. Shirley Weinstein in memory of her late husband, Yaakov ben Levi. And we will dedicate today's learning for a Neshamas Aliyah for Mrs. Bromberg's grandfather,
Avraham ben Shaltiel.
Avraham ben Shaltiel. Oh, Shalom. May all the Neshamas have an Aliyah, all the Kranks a Rafia, and Gansi Israeli. We are on the bottom of Chaf Vav. We learned heretofore, today's a lot of math, and you got to know certain facts. We learned heretofore that a piece of land of a base seya is 2,500 square amas. We also learned that if such a plot of land has 10 seedlings planted in it, that means little baby plants, little baby trees, that would be called an orchard or a forest if they're not fruit trees. And you would be able to plow in that Beiseya during the month of Elul in the last year, the year prior to the Shemitah year, because it's obvious that the plowing you're doing is to enable the soil to absorb more moisture, and it's for the benefit of the trees. It's not for plowing in order to later on plant seed. That's where we're up to. Okay, now we also know, just to remind you, that Ula had determined that if tree roots extend from the tree 16 amas, they bring nutrients into said tree. So we made a box 16 by 16. I'm sorry, 32 by 32, because 16 in each direction. And that came out to 1,028 square amas. Okay? But if you make boxes around all these little saplings, 10 into 2,500, it's only 250. So we have to deal with that discrepancy. And that's where we are today. We are right at near the bottom. Okay. Well, it's 3 lines from the bottom. Hello, have Ula. So 250 is significantly less than 1,028. Okay, so the problem there is, we're going to say, Ella miditanan. Maybe Ula got his concept of 1,028 to nourish a tree from a different Mishnah. Now, the distinctions in this Mishnah, there are 2, and they both may or may not have an effect later. But Shlosha Ilanos, if you have 3 trees in a 2,500 square foot base sale, and each of those tadiyahs mature trees, and each tree is owned by a different person. Yaakov owns 1, Yitzchak owns 1, and Shlomo owns the 3rd. They're also Hare Elu Mitzdarfin, the 3 trees combined to be called an orchard, and you can plow it in the month of Elul. Okay, so at least one possibility here is that a mature tree needs more ground to provide it nutrients than a sapling, and perhaps you'd have to cull trees from the saplings as they grow. Keep that in mind. Okay, so you can plow the whole thing based on bishvilan. You can plow now we're at the top of the next page, you can plow the base saw in Elul in order to accommodate the growth of the trees by loosening the soil and creating furrows for water to accumulate. So, kama have lahu. So, if you have three trees in a base saw, first of all, how many amas are in a base saw? Trei alfei v'chamesh mea garmide, 2,500 square amas. L'chol chad kama matele. So if you have three trees, how much ground does each tree get? Tamne meya v'talasin v'talasa v'tilta, 833 and a third. Right? Simple math, 2,500 divided by 3. So akate nafshe le the ula. But this isn't Ula's. In other words, this is
more than Ula's.
Right? No, it's less. Ula is 1,024, and this is 833. So this math exercise does not give us Ula's number. We still got a problem. So Gemara says lo dak. Ula was giving us an estimate. He wasn't making a specific numerical statement. So Amor da Amran lo dak. When all right, as a halachic standard, you're allowed to estimate when it becomes a chumrah, but you are not allowed to estimate if it becomes a kula. So the problem here is Amru da Amrinan lo dak la chumrah only when it's a chumrah. The kula lo dak mi amrinan. Does anybody say you can estimate if the halachic consequences result in a kula? Here, remember, Ula said you do not bring bichurim from a tree if there isn't 16 amas in the owner of the tree's property for it to draw nutrients. If there's only 15, then that one amma goes into the next door neighbor's property. The guy becomes a thief, and the produce from that tree cannot be brought for bikurim. So that would be a kula. He wouldn't have to bring. Me sarvat beribuba ka amrinan. So we're trying a new experiment. Remember, we took our piece of land and we divided it into 10 boxes. And we assumed there's a box around each tree that provides nutrition to that tree. But that's not how roots grow. A more logical way of determining the area occupied by a tree would be a circle, and you do its circumference, because the roots don't grow 5 feet up north and then 5.6 feet for a diagonal. The roots make a proximate circle around the base of the tree. Me sarvat berabua ka amrinan. Are we dealing with a square around that tree? The agula koy amrinan. No, we're really talking about a circle around the tree. So michti. Okay, imagine a box that's 10 by 10. So that's 100 square whatevers. Now, if you inscribe a circle inside that square so that the circumference of the circle is exactly 10, and you play pi, you have 5 for a radius.
You mean the circumference is exactly 10?
No,
The diameter.
the diameter is exactly 20 because it's 10 and yeah,
Radius.
the Gemara, the diameter is 10.
Right.
So the area of the circle is the radius, which is 5 squared, 25 times 3. Because the Gemara doesn't have 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 4, etc. So if you do the math, 5 times 5 is 25, times 3 is 75, which is 3/4. The area of a circle inside a square is 3/4 the area of the square inscribed around that circle. Okay, everybody got that? So we're going to do it in the Gemara now. Michti, let's look at this. Kama meruba yoser al ha'egel. How much more area is there in the square compared to the circle inscribed within it? Riva, 1/4. So now we take the math and we do 1/4, subtract 1/4 from 1024, okay, which is 256. Pashu lahu sheva mea v'shitin timarna. So you wind up with 768 square amas. Okay, so now you continue doing the math. Akati pashle palga da amsa. So now there is an error of 1/2 amma. If you did 16 or 15.5 ammas, it would work out, the math would work out the same. So hainu de lodak. So that 16.5, I'm sorry. So that's where the estimation on Ula's part. In order to get the number 833.3, you would have to have 16.5 ammas for the nutrients of the tree. And Ula said 16. So now it's a chumrah because he's discounting that extra half an amma, and then everything works, and now the math clears. Taishma. Now, a new Mishnah. Okay, we're quoting a Mishnah. Hakaina ilan v'karka'o mevi kore. If you have a deal with a person and your contract, you give him money and he gives you a tree, and your contract says the apple tree and its ground, but it doesn't give dimensions for the ground. It just says an apple tree and the ground it stands on. This Mishnah says your ownership is complete. And if that is a fruit tree and it's olives, you would have to bring bikurim from the first olive that grew on the tree. And you would read the paragraph, my father was an Aramean. That paragraph is in the Seder, and that's the paragraph you would read when you bring bikurim to Yerushalayim. So my love, what do we understand from this Mishnah? Kol shehu, since it doesn't say how much land, the guy who did the sale would argue, look, I gave you the land, the trunk is a foot wide, so I gave you 1 foot plus 2 amas, so you can plow, make a furrow around it, and that's all I gave you. That's nowhere near 16 or 16.5 amas. That's what I'm saying. The argument of the seller who doesn't want to give more than he has to would be, I'm giving you the diameter of the tree, that much land, plus a circle around it sufficient for you to plow a furrow to put water for the tree. So at best, if it's in Bavel, it would be 4 amas, 2 on each side, plus the diameter of the tree. In Eretz Yisrael, it would be 4 on each side is 8, plus the diameter of the tree. But that's nowhere near Ula's requirement. So according to Ula, the guy would not bring bikurim because his tree is getting nutrients from the seller's other property. Yet the Mishnah clearly says He brings and he reads.
He's getting nutrients from the sellers on the property.
Yeah, of course. All he owns. Remember, we're in Besdin. The buyer says, I own a lot of land. My tree needs nutrients. The seller says, I'm sorry, I sold you the tree and the land it's on. So that's the 1 foot diameter of the trunk of the tree. All right, you have to plow around it. So I'll give you the 2 on each or 4 on each side to plow around it. But I'm not giving you 16. I don't care what ULA says. Contract doesn't say 16. The contract says the tree and the land it's on. So I want, as the seller, to minimize it. And Mistama Besdin might well accept my argument. And so Ula would say this guy can't bring Bikurim, but the Mishnah clearly, and Ula's an Amira, and the Mishnah, which is Tanaim, the Tanakama in that Mishnah clearly says, not only does he bring, but he reads the paragraph, which makes it firmer. So that's a big kasha on Ula. Okay? So Ma'alav, Kol Shahu, all the guys getting to a little bit of land. So the Gemara says no. The Besdin took the side of the buyer. And it awarded him, even though the contract didn't have numbers, it awarded him Sheish Esrei Amma. He awarded him a circle around the tree of 16 Ammas. So now the Mishnah and Ula are together. Okay, I can't explain it any more clearly than that. The seller wants to minimize, the buyer wants to maximize. If the Besdin goes with the seller, then it's a conflict with Ula. But if the Besdin goes with the buyer, it's not a conflict with Ula. All right, so now we have not yet upslogged Ula. So we're going to try again. Taishma, new Mishnah. Kana shtei ilanos b'toch shel chaveroi. I buy 2 trees from my neighbor in the land it's on. Maybe v'yein. Here we make a compromise. We let him bring the bikurim from the tree that grows first, but we do not let him read the paragraph. So that if it's not qualified for bikurim, he just brought olives to the temple. But he didn't read the paragraph saying, these are my bikurim. So that's a compromise. Okay? So that is an argument to Ula. Ha, shlosha mevi kaire. But now let's analyze that Mishnah. If it says, if I buy 2, I don't read. So Mistama, if I buy more than 2, I do read. Okay? So ha shlosha mevi v'kaire. If it's 3, he brings and he reads. So that's, and all he owns is the land around the trees. So my love, kol shahu, we're going to ask again. All he has is a little bit of land around each tree. Lo, not so. Hechinami shesh esrei amma. No, again, the Besdin would award him 32 ammas in diameter around the tree, which is a radius of 16, which is Ula's number. So we did not knock out Ula. Toshma, let's try again. Rabbi Akiva Aimer, Karka Kol Shahu, Chayiv B'Peyu U'B'Bechurim. Rabbi Akiva says, if you have 1 square inch, 1 square tefach of land, you have to bring bikurim from the produce if it's that grows on that thing. And when you cut down that produce, you have to leave paya. You have to leave a stalk in the corner for a poor guy to come and take. And okay, so the kaisvin love prusbal. And also, this is an agavurcha. you can use that tiny little piece of land as the for a pruzbul. Pruzbul is when someone owes you money and Shemitah year comes. So you transfer the loan to Bezdin, but it has to have a chrayas. So you have to make it a lien on land. So even a guy owes you $1 million, you can make a lien on a square inch of land. And it's like a kinyan agav. And you can even do a kinyan agav, which you could buy a whole warehouse full of metaltalin by making a kinyan agav on that little piece of land. The niknin ama nixim she'ein lehem achrayas. You can buy property that you can't put a lien on, meaning movables, on that tiny little piece of land. So this is smaller than the little piece of land that we hypothecated under a tree. Nonetheless, you bring bikurim, and you're even chayav and peya. And what we're talking about is chite, is wheat. You can't put a tree on 1 square tefach, but you could put 4 little wheat plants on 1 square tefach and harvest 3, leave 1 for peya. And if it's the first wheat that you get on any of your holdings, that could be brought as bikurim. So since we're switched from trees to wheat, we haven't challenged Ula. Okay?
The value of the wheat is not the value.
It has nothing to do with it. The first produce, the first olive, the first pomegranate, the first wheat, or the first barley. No, it's what is the first thing. That's what you bring to Jerusalem. Now, your basket is pretty schwach looking, so you decorate it with flowers and stuff. And you decorate the donkey with to make a whole big deal out of it. But all you bring is really very little, because it's the very first, when you look at your trees and you see 1 olive blossom full off and an olive start to form, you tie a ribbon so you know which was the first. Same with the wheat in the wheat field. Okay, so now we're going and we're going to say this statement where we're talking about trees, not wheat. Daika Nami, you can even see that if you analyze the Mishnah carefully. Diktani Kol Shahu, the Mishnah says a tiny little bit of land, Shmami no, that it doesn't mean a tree, because a tree, when it's mature, takes up much more than a tiny bit of land. Okay, Toshma, new effort. Elon Meksaso be'eretz ubiksaso b'chutzalaretz. All right, this is a thought experiment. You own an orchard in Israel on the border with Jordan. One of your trees happens, the apple seed fell right on the exact borderline. So now the adult tree, half of the trunk is in Israel and half of the trunk is in Jordan. Okay, or Syria, or wherever you want to do it. Okay, now, when you harvest your apples, they're tevel if they're born in Israel. Okay, they're not tevel if they're apples from Chutz La'aretz. So what do you do with this tree? There are 3 possibilities. You could say the whole tree is a Jewish tree, and it's tevel. You could say the whole tree is a Goyish tree, and it's not tevel. Or you could draw a hypothetical line up the trunk of the tree, and then out over the ball of branches and stuff on top of the tree, and say all the apples on the Jordanian side of that imaginary line are Goyish, and all the apples on the Jewish side of that line are Tevel. Yeah.
He owned the land on both sides of the line.
He could, yeah. He's not a thief. But if you own a farm in Babylonia, you don't. There's no Truma and Meiser.
And he had Jordanian land too.
So you own what land?
But he owns it.
That you own, but it's not here. It's not his. You can I buy land in England?
Yeah.
Does it become America?
It's not close enough.
Oh God! Can I buy land in Canada?
Yeah.
Can I make it America?
You wouldn't have to pay taxes, what they say.
In Canada, not in America. That you can't arbitrarily change a border. Shimon didn't allow questions.
Okay.
All right. I mean, a legitimate question. Teddy asked legitimate question. That's a klutz, gosh. I'm going to throw you out of here.
Okay.
All right. So the Mishnah says, or the Brisa rather, Tevel v'chulin ma'orivin es zebuzeh. You assume at this point in the Mishnah, in the Brisa, all of the produce of that tree is mechuyev in trumas and maisras. So you don't have to be careful about this imaginary line. You pick the apples, you throw them in the same bucket as the apples from the rest of your trees, which are clearly in Israel, and you take trumas and maisras and gemarnu. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. Okay, Divrei Rebbe. That's Reb Yehuda Hanasi. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer, Hagoydel Mechayev Chayev. You draw this imaginary chalk line around the tree and around the top of the tree, and all the apples on the Jewish side, where you're mechuyev in trumas and maisras, they have to take trumas and maisras. They're tevel. V'hagoydel potter. But the apples that grow above the, to the east of the border that are in Jordan are not tevel. They're goyish apples, and you don't have to take trumas and maisras from them. So now that's the brisa. Ad kan lo pligi. So the basis for the dispute between Reb Shimon and Reb Gamliel is the Mar Sover Yesh Breira. One opinion, Reb Shimon, you can say Breira. Now, Breira means after something happens, you can determine what happened before. So Reb Shimon says, in all the apples on the Jordanian side of the tree, we can determine by Breira that they got their nutrients exclusively from Jordan. And all the apples on the west side of the tree gained their nutrients exclusively from Israeli land. Okay? And Umar Sover, Rebbe holds Ein Breira, that when it comes to at least tree sap, there's no Breira, that the sap is sucked up by the roots and then distributed randomly within the tree. So an apple on the Jordanian side has some Jordanian nutrients and some Israeli nutrients, and so on, etc. Okay? So now, b'mai skinan. So how could we even have this argument? I mean, it's an argument in Metzias. You could theoretically put dye on the ground and see what happens in the tree. Or a botanist could tell you what's happening in the tree. So how could you even begin to have the argument? So the Gemara says this is a very unique case. There is a large triangular, axe blade-shaped rock in the ground. And it just so happens that the blade of that axe-shaped rock is exactly on the border. Okay? And you planted this tree, so the tree grew above this rock, and the roots were split by the rock. So half of the roots are totally on the Israeli side, and there are no little shoots that ran the other way because the rock blocked them. And half the roots are on the Jordanian side of the rock. And again, none of those roots could creep over into the Israeli side because they're blocked by the rock. So now you could have this argument. And since this unique circumstance of this split root system, Ula's math doesn't have anything to do with it. And therefore it doesn't argue with Ula. If that's the case, my time of the Rebbe. So if we're saying that half the tree gets its nutrients from each side when there's no mingling in the roots, why does Rebbe say there's mingling in the tree? Hadade Arve. He says, look, I don't care about the roots. The Metzias is the tree. If this side needs nutrients, it takes it from whence it comes. He doesn't care. That's Rebbe's position. So, so what is the dispute now that we have this weird case of the rock? Mar Sover, Vira Mevalvel, one holds that the trunk mixes the nutrients, that's Rebbe, and Mar Sover, Rabban Gamliel, Shimon ben Gamliel Sover, Hai Dechudei, Koi, Vahai Lechudei Koi, that each side of the tree gets its nutrients from the roots on that side of the tree. And that's their argument. And it is not a science argument, it's a halachic argument. So it doesn't really matter what the facts are. It's a halachic argument. And we hold like Rebbe, but Reb Shimon has a point. Okay. Now, let's go back to Ula's numbers. V'sheish esrei ama v'sulo. How can you say that the first 16 amas of root structure brings nutrients to the tree, and then magically that's the dividing line, and beyond that it doesn't bring nutrients to the tree? We learned differently. We learned earlier 25 amas away from the border if your friend has a well there. Okay? Vaha ditnan, did we not learn marchikin es ha'ilan min habor esrim v'chomesh ama? No, a sycamore tree was 50. Okay? Amar Abaya mizel tuva azle. It is absolutely true that the roots can grow longer than 16. And if you have a well there, that root will penetrate your well and screw up your well. So I have to take that into account. However, achushe lo machashe ela ad sheish v'yesrim amo. But only 16 can actually draw nutrients and moisture from the ground and fertilize the tree. And feed the tree. That would be Ula's position. So now we have, it's interesting, right? I mean, they didn't have botanists. They were doing the best they could. And Ula says a huge root structure, but only the core of the root ball nourishes the tree. So now we're going to have a new problem. Ki asa Rav Dimi. When Reb Dimi came to Babylonia, remember, people went back and forth, and they brought Rabbi Yochanan, who was the Gadol Hador, what he said in Israel, and everybody accepted that as definitive. So here's what happened. Ki asa Reb Dimi Yomer, boy mine Reish Lakish me Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Dimi said the following. Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan about this. Ilan hasomach lemeitzar b'toch shesh esrei amamahu. If the tree is illegally planted closer than 16 from the border, what's the deal? Can you, not the border of the country, but the border of the neighbor's property? Is he a thief and he can't bring Bikurim, or is he not a thief and he can bring Bikurim? Amar Le, according to Rav Dimi, Rabbi Yochanan said, Gazlan hu v'ein mevi'in mimenu Bikurim. He is indeed a thief. His roots are getting nutrients from Schwartz's orchard, and he cannot bring Bikurim. Okay, so that's the answer, right? Except so Ravin Omer Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he reported Rabbi Yochanan said something different. Echad Ilon Samach Lameitzer v'Echad Ilan Hanoite. Doesn't matter if the trunk of the tree is closer to the neighbor's property than the requisite 16. And it even doesn't matter if branches of the tree hang over the neighbor's property. Now remember, Rabban Gamliel would say they're being nutrients from the neighbor if they're over the neighbor. But doesn't matter. An olive hanging over the neighbor's property, or an olive on a tree that's only 10 amas from the border, okay? Maybe v'koreh. He takes the other extreme. Not only does he bring, but he even reads. Okay? Sha'al menas kain, new piece of data that we never had before. When the Jews moved into Israel under Yehoshua, he anticipated this tree overhang, tree too close problem. And he made a takana that even if your tree is too close and you might be a thief, or even if your tree overhangs, you are allowed to harvest your tree and bring Bikurim and read. That was a takana. So the whole discussion we had was academic, because the halacha is you can, because of a takana of Yehoshua ben Nun. Sha'al menas kain hinchil Yehoshua Yisrael es haaretz. When he divvied up the land, he required owners to grant their neighbors the right to plant trees without having a fight. Okay, new Mishnah. We introduced overhang in that takana. So the next Mishnah is going to deal with overhang. My tree has branches overhanging the neighbor's field. Kaitzis mole ha mardeya al gave hamacharesha. My branches are hanging over the neighbor's wheat field. Now he wants to bring his plow along the border, but these branches are impeding the movement of his ox. Okay, so he's allowed to trim my branches to the height of the implement that hooks the plow to the ox, which is higher than the back of the ox, so that he can go through unimpeded.
The head of the ox. What about the head of
No, the tool that hooks the plow to the ox sticks up. The ox can lower his head, but the tool is inanimate. It can't shrink. So it can push through and get caught in the branches. So you're allowed to cut off, the owner of the field can cut off those branches so his plow can have unimpeded movement. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. Okay. But carob trees and sycamore trees, which in addition to having large root balls, are also very densely branched. Like, but Lahavdil say Christmas trees. When a person buys such a tree, he wants it to have dense branches and be very symmetrical. So these trees have very dense branches, okay? And they're rapid growing. So what the neighbor can do is draw this imaginary chalk line up the tree on where the border between the two properties is, and hack off everything on his side of the line. And you now have this lopsided tree. Okay? Now, what if it's a field that has irrigation and there's an irrigation ditch on your side of the line between the two properties? Beis HaShalchin, an irrigated field, Kol ha'Ilan Keneged HaMishaklotes. He again can chop the tree off completely in an imaginary line directly above the border between the two properties. Okay, Aber Shol Omer Kol Ilan Srok Keneged HaMishlokas. He says all trees that are not fruit trees, not just the sycamore, but all trees that are not fruit-bearing trees. So there's no halacha that you have to not cut off branches from a fruit tree. You're allowed to hack off the whole tree on your side. Now it's going to be a question on what is he going on the ratio or on the sefer. The Gemara will deal with that. Okay. Iboilahu, they asked the question. Abba Shol, Aresha Koi, did Abba Shol, was he talking about that where if it's not a fruit tree, I don't have to be careful to only cut to the level of the top of my plow? Or Hasefa Koi, or is he saying that where there's irrigation ditch, you can hack off the whole tree? Okay, so what are we talking about? So Toshma, let's try and figure it out. The Sanya, we have a brisa, Beis HaShalach in a irrigated field. Abba Shol Omer Kol Ha'Ilan Keneged HaMishkoles. Everything above the borderline, you're allowed to chop off. Mipnei Shahat Seil Ra LeBeis HaShalachin. Because forget the branches and bumping into them. You have a tree and it extends to my property. It's casting a shadow on my wheat, and it won't grow as well as if it's in bright sunlight. So I can't go across the border and cut down your tree, but I sure as heck can cut off everything that hangs over the border. And Shma Mina Areshakoi. So this is a riot that he's talking about the beginning of the Mishnah. And if the shade is bothering my fruit, I don't have to stop at the height of the plow. I can keep going and cut it all off. Shma Mina, we learned that. Amar Rav Ashi, Masnisa Nami Deka. The Mishnah itself, when read carefully, proves that point. The Tani Kol Elon Srok. All trees that don't bear fruit. That word kol can be cut off on the line. If you say that all Rabbi Shol was talking about was the beginning of the Mishnah, it works fine. Hainu diktani kol ilan. That's why later on he says anything can be cut off all the way up. Ella, if he said he's only talking about the second part with an irrigated field, Elon Shrek Maboile, he shouldn't have bothered using the word coal. He should have just said any barren tree or any non-fruit bearing tree. Ella lav. So what do we learn? Shmamina Reshakoi. That Rabbi Abishol was talking about I do not have to stop cutting at plow height. Okay, even in a non-irrigated field, one that's rained on. Ilan Shahunay Telerishus Arabim. What if my tree is planted on my property, but branches hang out into the street in front of my house. Okay? The community can send a workman to hack off the branches to a height of a camel with a guy sitting on it. That's what the Tanakhama says. Okay? Reb Yehuda Omer, Gamel Toin, Pishtan, Ochavile, Zimoros. He can cut it off to the height of the pile of goods on the back of the camel. The example given is flax or twigs, but it could be any load. So now, okay, and Reb Shimon Omer, Kol Elon Keneged HaMishlokas. Reb Shimon goes further. He says if there's any overhang, no matter how high it is, the community can hack it off or require the owner to hack it off. Mipnei Atuma. Because a Kohen going by, if there's an ohel and a possible theoretical dead dude under the tree on your side, then the ohel makes that Kohen tameh. Or worse, even if it's a zar and he's got truma he's bringing to a Kohen, now the truma is tameh. It was the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, but you're right. Okay. Montana, the Venezican Busser Umodno Vahashta Azlina. So we're going to present the following concept. If I do something that is not dangerous or harmful now, but could in the future be dangerous or harmful, okay, am I allowed to do it? So Montana, the Bazikin, Basar Umodna, Vahashta Azlinan. Who is the Tana that says, I don't care what could happen in the future. We worry about the here and now. That's the question, because our Mishnah seems to be talking about the here and now. Omeresh Lekesh, B'machlaikes Shenuya. We already learned that issue in another Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar Omer in our Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar says, the Tanan ein Eisin Chalal Tachas Rishus Harabim Borosh Shisin Uma Oros. In another Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar says, you cannot tunnel beneath a road and make a well, a slanted well, or you can't make a pit, or you can't make like an underground storeroom. Because it could be that at some point in the future that the roof will weaken and it'll cave in the road. Okay? Rebbe Lezer Matir. But Rebbe Lezer says, I don't care what's going to happen in the future. Right now it's safe. You can do it. Kidei shetehei agola mechalekes v'teuna avone. The requirement simply is that a big truck full of heavy stones, if it can safely go on the road, even with your tunnel under it, then it's okay. So the standard is, right now, the heaviest conceivable load that might go by can do so safely, tunnel to your heart's content. Rabbi Yochanan Aimer, Afilu Tema Rabbanan. You could even say that the digging issue is according to the rabbis who do worry about the future. Hasam Zimnin de Mifchis, the Lav Adaite. Sometimes the beams holding up that roof, that's supporting that cave, could get rotten and collapse. And because nobody would realize that those beams are weakening. Okay, aval hacha. So, but you can't apply that to our case because if branches grow back, everybody's going to see them. They're not concealed by 10 feet of ground. So maybe our Mishnah could even be saying even futures we worry about. But if they come, you'd clip off more branches. Okay, aval hacha, but over here, kame kama kaitzla. If each time a branch grows back, somebody will snip it off. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Gamel Ta'in Upash Pishtan O Chivle Zemoiros. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to trim the branches to a height of a laden camel. Okay? And the Tanakama said the camel with a rider. So what's the obvious question? Which is taller? Right? In other words, in their argument, who's got the taller case?
Right.
Okay? Pshita de shiura de rabbanan nafish. It's obvious that the camel and rider is taller. The Isal Kedaich Shura de Rabbi Yehuda nafish. If you say Rabbi Yehuda's height is greater, rabbanan b'shiura de Rabbi Yehuda hachi avdei. What would they do concerning a laden camel? Would they say that if the pile is higher than the height of a rider on the camel, that it's tough noogies on the camel owner? Okay. The Elamai. So what do you want to say over here? Shiura the Rabbanan Nefesh, that the rabbi's height, which is a rider and a camel, is actually taller. Rabbi Yehuda Bashir the Rabbanan Mayavid. So what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Why you don't have to trim the branches the height of a rider on a camel. So Evsher the Gachin v'chalif to say, if the rider is sitting on the camel and he's strolling along and he sees a branch in front of him, he can duck down. But a package can't duck down. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda uses the package standard. Rabbi Shimon Aimer call ha'ilan keneged hamishkailes mipnei ha'tu'umno. He says that the reason you have to trim the branches that hang over the public thoroughfare are because of the problem of Kodshim becoming Tomei or a Kohen becoming Tomei. Tanya, we explain that Mipnei Ohel Hatuma, because the branches make a tent over the road. Pshita, that's obviously the reason. Why did he have to even say that? Mipnei Hatuma Tanan, the Mishnah says, because of Tuma. So Imas Nisan Have Amina. Had we only said Tuma in our Mishnah, I might have thought Dilma Demaisi Oirev Tuma Vashade Osam. Not that it's an Ohel. It doesn't say an Ohel, it just says Mipnei Tuma. So the reason a overhanging branch could be problematic for Tuma is a bird could have a dead sheretz in its mouth, and it could drop the sheretz onto the branch, and it would get caught in the crook of the branch, and now there's mamish a sheretz over the Kohen's head. So we're not worried about Tuma from a grave. Most private trees don't have graves under them. So I would have thought that Visagya b'delachule me'alma. All I would have to do is trim the tree severely so that there would be nothing that the dead sheretz could catch on. And I wouldn't have to cut back the whole tree. So Kamash Malan, we have to take into account also the issue of Ohel, and just trimming the tree severely would not be sufficient. You have to hack off all the branches. Okay? Hadran Allah Kol Yach. And tomorrow we'll pick up the new parent.
What timing exactly?
After davening.
Oh, yeah?
Depends on how fast they do the sleep.
Right.
I mean, if Schneller Keller davens, it
Schneller
won't be a problem.
Are you in touch with Mel Greenbaum?
Yes,
He is where? Up in
he
Muncie?
is in a place called the Nautilus in
Nautilus.
Lido Beach, Long Island. And they had a very rough trip up because their planes was delayed with that business with the delays. They didn't get there till the middle of the night, but the Uber never came when they got to the airport. But they finally were settled at 5 a.m. and everything was fine. The food was good, she said.
He liked it, wants to stay there.
It's too expensive. No, they can't afford it. It's $6,000 a month, and it's not close enough to the kids. The 3 of the 4 kids are in teenage.
So what was the Havamina?
He's coming back after a month.
The Havamina was they rented in a place in Muncie, and nobody died, so there wasn't a room in Muncie, so they had to go somewhere else. One of their kids is in Woodmere, so they went to this place.
To the north.
But for a month, it's a nice vacation. But for a lifetime,
Yes.
It's not close enough to the majority of the kids, and they don't want to move anyway. That's their daughter wants them to move.
Right.
Baruch Hashem, my kids don't like me that much, so I won't have that problem. I hope.
You hope they don't like you?
No, I hope that I won't have to move to a nursing home near my kids.
Right. Yes, everyone has that prayer. We should always be able to take care of ourselves.
Now, I don't have to take care of myself. My wife can take care of me.
They'll pay to keep you away, that's all.
Yeah, well, I don't. That would be too blatant. Because I have a frum kid, so they have to at least have the appearance of kibbutz av.
Have a good day, everyone.
No, the truth is they actually do lie. Every single grandchild calls every single Friday.
Uh-huh.
Oh, your grandchildren.
Oh, my kids call too, but my daughter-in-laws call one on Sunday, so it's a different cheshbon. But all the grandchildren call Friday, even the ones in Israel,
grandparents and grandchildren get along so
because they have enemies in common.
Yeah, common enemy. My son-in-law didn't like that joke.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I have incredibly great daughters-in-law. And seeing now with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, having girls is much harder than boys.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, boys, you buy 2 pairs of black pants and 2 white shirts, and they're set for the year. Girls have 55 outfits in the closet and don't have anything to wear.
You always worried about them.
And you worry more about girls than boys.
Boys just stand up till you see your face up, and that's it. And
That's
girls,
right. If they come home, they don't even come home Pesach. They stay in Israel. But girls are much more. A father has a much more concerns with a daughter, and mothers fight with daughters. The girls are much more difficult, but so when you get them fully grown, you're better off.
Pay a little more, get them fully grown.
What?
Pay a little more, get them fully grown.
No, you pay less.
Pay less?
Yeah, you pay for half a wedding. You don't pay for tuition for 12 years. And seminary, which is outrageous. And you get a veto. If you don't like the girl, you can tell your kid, look elsewhere. You don't get a veto when you produce something.
I get a veto.
Huh?
My boys didn't get a veto either.
Oh, my boys asked, we were involved in the do. My grandchildren, my daughter-in-law, picked them up. Each guy married the girl his mother picked.
Really?
Yep. And they went out on 2 dates and then got engaged and got married.
Hurry, no.